My name is Barbara Kessler. I lead several of our global partner programs here at AWS, including our MSP partner program and a segment and the team that supports that. We're also going to be hearing today from our colleagues at ARC Group, Shane Day, General Manager at ARC Group, and Thomas Robinson, Partner Solutions Architect and Technical Lead for the MSP Partner Program. So let's take a quick look at the agenda. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, and I know that we have a lot of our partners represented here who are well involved in this journey as a cloud MSP. I also see a lot of new and unfamiliar faces who I look forward to connecting with later. So I want to start the day by sort of setting the stage around what managed services look like in the cloud and what that looks like in this next generation of MSP. Then we'll talk a little bit about the opportunities for partners in this space and how some of our leading partners are seeing success. Then we're going to talk with Shane a little bit from ARC Group about the success that they've seen as an MSP partner. And Thomas is going to come and share with us some best practices in optimizing your managed services, leveraging AWS services. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps in getting started for those of you who would like to move further along in this journey. And I always forget this is a build slide. I should probably take that animation off. But let's start for a minute by talking about the perspectives of the traditional MSP or managed service providers in traditional environments versus our cloud-based next generation environments. Let's just take a couple of these to talk about. In the traditional space of an MSP, the focus has largely been around running and operating solutions. And where we see our partners finding a lot of success today is when they broaden that perspective to include designing, consulting, implementing, and automating those solutions for their customers over time. Security is another really compelling area that our MSPs are focusing in. This really becomes priority zero for AWS, for you, and for the customers that you support. And so we see a lot of great opportunity for MSPs who can bridge that divide between what's traditionally been the space of the managed security services provider, or MSSP, and be able to also manage the infrastructure through application for their customers to deliver solutions over time that meet those customers' compliance and security needs. Change management, another really interesting area to take a look at as an MSP. Traditionally, change management has focused around capacity planning, patching, pushing updates, et cetera. And a lot of those things are solved on the AWS platform and automated and scalable solutions. So the next-gen MSP can really has an interesting opportunity to leverage DevOps methodologies and CI/CD skill sets to drive greater automation and more seamless experiences for your customers. So you as an MSP should never be viewed as a point at which you slow down your customers' development work, and instead you have this unique opportunity to leverage these skill sets to drive greater speed and agility for your customers and allow them to unlock innovation through these additional skills. So all of those things together really allow you to move as an MSP from being one of a network of outsourced vendors working with your customers to really becoming a trusted advisor and partner to your customers over time. So where we see our managed service providers really finding success is in enabling this full life cycle of solutions to their customers. So planning and designing as a consulting organization, and then extending those capabilities to build and migrate as a professional services team, and then taking that next step further to run and operate in the traditional purview of an MSP, and then taking it a step further to optimization services, both cost optimization, which I know a lot of you do for your customers today, but also in helping your customers keep up with the pace of innovation from AWS. How are you taking those new products, services, and features and incorporating that in the solutions that you're delivering to your customers? So we've taken a quick look at what the viewpoint is of a next generation managed services provider. So what does that translate to an opportunity for you? Last year, we reached out to Forrester Consulting and commissioned them to conduct a total economic impact study, or a TEI study, that's titled The Business Case for Next Generation AWS MSPs. And as part of that research, Forrester interviewed 8 of our leading MSP partners to understand the investments that they had made in their practice, business considerations and risks that they faced over time, and then the revenues, margins, and results that they saw. They took that data together and created what they call a composite view and projected performance over a 3-year period of time. So I want to take a quick look at some of this research with you. The stats there on the left show that of the partners who participated in this research, they were seeing 50% or greater gross margin across their AWS practice, with 57% or higher just in the recurring revenue space of their management services. The pie chart on the right is a really interesting breakdown I'd love to chat about. The top, I'm trying to figure out, top right, the dark purple there, the medium purple, 22% of the margin dollars of these partners over the 3-year window, 22% came from initial design and professional services. So that's engaging with new customers, consulting with them about their AWS consumption, and then implementing those solutions. So it's the consulting and professional services. The 22% on the left side in the mauve, I think there's too many pinks and purples on this slide. We might need to change that. And the mauve, we'll call it, that 22% of the margin contribution came from running and operating those solutions. So taking that design work that was done really effectively, highly automated, making sure that it runs over time really well for your customers, contributed another 22% of that margin. 39% of the margin dollars over 3 years came from add-on work with those existing customers. So the partners in this study were engaging early, providing consulting and professional services, building or migrating an initial workload, and because they did that really successfully and delivered the outcomes their customers were looking for, they pulled in an additional nearly 40% of margin and follow-up work within those same accounts. So really compelling picture. You can see a couple of other additional areas of margin contribution, including reselling of AWS services or reselling of IP that you might develop and sell to your customers as well. So what investments did these partners make in order to achieve those results? The chart on the left takes a look at the initial $1.3 million that the representative partner invested upfront to build out the appropriate people, processes, and tools to build their managed services practice with AWS. The initial payback window on that upfront investment was right around 1 year, so between 12 and 14 months for the average partner. What I find really compelling in that particular chart is that the costs continue to increase incrementally over time as you add new customers to your business and you're continuing to support a broader base of customers, but the benefits or the margin dollars increase at a faster rate. So the composite partner from this research was becoming more and more profitable year over year as they continued to refine and build out their managed service practice. The chart on the right, the pie chart, is a breakdown of where those areas of investment were made. Probably not a surprise to any of you that the single largest expense in building and maintaining your AWS practice is having the right staff and people. So incremental staffing and keeping those folks on your teams was the largest area of investment at about 38% of the 3-year total costs. 19% in marketing. And this is really where you have a great opportunity to educate your customers, not just advertising, but really how you're driving education and helping your customers understand what you can do for them that's different than what could be accomplished for them in a traditional service offering. Another 16% of cost was spent in research and development, and 25% in sales, general, and administrative. As a brief call out, training is noted here at 2% of the total cost. The training itself certainly carries an expense, but the greater cost associated there is maintaining that staff that's well-trained, certified, and experienced on AWS. So in theory, this all sounds great. But for me personally, real life success stories are always a much more compelling way to demonstrate what success can look like. So I'd like to invite my colleague Shane Day, General Manager at ARC Group, on stage, and he's going to talk a little bit about ARC Group's transformation from a traditional to a next generation managed service provider and the kind of success that they've been able to deliver to their customers as a result. So here you go.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks for the welcome. Great to see everyone here today, and it's great to have the opportunity to present our transformation story from Melbourne IT to ARC Group. And a big part of that has been our partnership with AWS, and specifically the Managed Service Provider Program. We believe that next generation managed service is fundamentally a different business model. So we come from the traditional hosting infrastructure provider model, and that was all about scale and cost. But today, as a next generation managed service provider, that's a very different model. So what's that fundamental shift? Well, for us, that was a pivot from being a technology organization into being an organization that's focused around customer experience, focused on our customers' customers, and helping our customers solve those difficult challenges. For us to be able to do that, we've built deep expertise in data analytics, in human-centered design, in mobile and web development, and of course, leveraging our history and legacy around technology, but pivoting that to be AWS services based. I'm currently working with a customer which tells that story a little bit further, that's all about keeping their workforce safe. That's the overall goal of the project, and that's a very different objective to what we used to achieve when we were an infrastructure or web hosting provider. And to do that, to allow us to change, we leverage a lot of AWS services to achieve that outcome. So the solution for that customer is built around serverless, it's built around machine learning, and a number of other AWS services to pull that together. It's much more than just managing the operating system. So rather than me talk about that, I thought it would be great to introduce a customer success story. So Landmark is Australia's largest distributor of fertilizer and farming products, and they had a challenge. They had lots of information in lots of different places, and it was difficult for them to make decisions as quickly as they needed to. So we helped them with this challenge, and I'd just like to introduce Landmark to tell that story.
Landmark's been serving Australian agriculture for over 150 years, from merchandise to fertilizer to crop inputs, insurance, finance, services. If a farmer needs help with it or needs it, we can help them. Today, Landmark is helping us integrate new technologies into an old traditional business. The greater goal of our precision agriculture business is to integrate new technologies and help our farmers be more efficient and grow their business, but also the communities that we're a part of across the entire country. As a part of this process, we're creating and storing operational data, yield information, soil and tissue tests, operational maps. Traditionally, we've had outsourced IT partners that have managed that data for us, but we've had very little visibility between the systems themselves. The realization for us was that we're creating all this data every day, and if we could view it in a single source and understand it better, we could help our farmers and our customers be better in their businesses. Having come to the conclusion that we needed help with our solution, we engaged ARC Group.
ARC Group built for Landmark a cloud analytics platform that incorporates all their external data sources into one central place. This gives Landmark the ability to review all their information in an overlapped, integrated way. It allows them to visualize key reports and key information that they need to run their business effectively. The data automatically updates every day, so Landmark can now get the visibility over what's happening out in the countryside and make more accurate decisions across the stock, procurement and logistics.
ARC Group's capabilities with data analytics, cloud computing and security have helped us to actually come to a solution that's going to answer the business problem. I'm from a non-technical background, so having ARC Group being able to step me through the process and explain how things would work allowed me to just focus on the actual problem and not have to worry about technical details. The business solution itself is helping us be more prepared as a company for the season as it unfolds, and we're actually able to address our customers' needs proactively. It was really great working with Art Group. They were focused on making sure that we were actually addressing the business problem, not just answering questions. They went above and beyond for us.
So whilst that's a great success story of where we are as an organisation today, I think it's important to reflect on where we've come from as Melbourne IT. So Melbourne IT established itself around the early 2000s. We were born in the dot-com boom, and we were the main domain registrar for the Australian market, sole domain registrar for the .com.au domain space. By 2010, we'd become the largest web hosting and infrastructure provider partner within the Australian market. We had thousands of virtual machines, I think 9 data centres, which I'm happy to say is at least half now and pushing that much down further. Petabytes of data storage, and if you include our SMB customer area, hundreds of thousands of customers. As I mentioned before, our value proposition as a traditional managed service provider was really around price and scale. How cheap can we make our servers, and how big can we grow our environment? So in around 2011, 2012, we started to see the market change fundamentally. There was globalization, many new players within, from a customer perspective that we weren't working with in the Australian market, and also technology providers started looking much more keenly at the Australian market. There was rumours of Amazon or AWS establishing a presence within Sydney, and our customers were changing their focus to be a lot more client focused. So we knew that it was time for us to change. So we asked ourselves some tough questions. Who's our customer? What's the value we provide to that customer? Who are we partnering with? And what market segment do we want to play in? They're really important questions. And the model down the bottom describes how we kind of looked at the market segment in Australia. So on the left-hand side, you've got your advisory-led organisations. So they're your professional services organisations, Big Four professional services organisations. On the right-hand side, you've got your tech-led organisations, so traditional outsourcing organisations, all of IT outsourcing. We didn't see ourselves as either of those things. So we decided to make a bet. Whilst keeping our history and our proud heritage in market-facing web and digital platforms, we decided to partner with AWS. And at this time, we onboarded our first next-generation managed service customer in Domino's. And for Domino's, we were helping support their online digital platform to order their pizzas. And I understand that this supports about 70% of their revenue. So as you can see, that's a much different value proposition. We've flipped from being cost-based into how can we enable that organisation to help their bottom line. So we will, rather than treat AWS presence in Sydney as a threat, we took it as an opportunity, and we're really proud that we're a launch partner with AWS when they launched in Sydney, and shortly after that, established ourselves as a premium consulting partner. We also went on to obtain the managed service provider, and we've retained that for at least the last 4 years, and we're proud of that history. So whilst we had pivoted, we're more customer-centric, looking at value proposition, the market was still asking for more. They wanted broader digital capabilities, and customers needed to make more informed and quicker decisions. So in 2015, 2016, we made some acquisitions. We acquired Outware Mobile, who are a leader in mobile development and human-centered design. We also acquired InfoReady as an experienced data analytics company to enable us to have data-driven solutions. And this today has changed the way that we work. Rather than being a managed service provider, we're a managed service partner to our customers, and we're able to offer next generation managed services across that whole spectrum, whether it's data analytics, whether it's mobile, whether it's web, or whether it's traditional cloud and DevOps. And all of those things together deliver great outcomes for our customer. But where it works best is where it's a three-way partnership between us, between our customers, and between AWS. Where do we see things going from there? So whilst next generation managed services is funnily different, we see that things are only going to speed up, and that next generation managed services providers of the future will be the ones that are successful, will be able to manage that change and help their customers manage increasing change. So we have a model at the ARC Group called our continuous value delivery model. And what that helps us do is manage the whole workflow or cycle of manage, operate, and innovate for our customer. And we were proud that using that model, we were named Innovation Partner of the Year for AWS for 2018, not just for Australia, but also for APAC. So what have we learned through our journey? So we've learned that next generation is different. It's more than just DevOps. You need to understand your customer and understand their business. You need to leverage the capability of AWS to focus on AWS to help you with the undifferentiated heavy lifting. So you can focus on the differentiated heavy lifting. So you can help those organizations solve those challenges, such as making their workforce safer. And you need to innovate. This is a great conference to get innovation ideas, and I think a challenge that I set for myself, and perhaps one for yourselves, is just take one thing back. You're going to learn so many things over the next couple of days. Take one thing back to a customer, one thing back to your organization, and experiment with that, and see how that can make a difference to the value that you deliver to your customers. So just to complete my little presentation, I thought I'd close with a customer quote. And what was, I think, as important as the customer quote was how it came about. So I was having lunch with Brad on Friday, and we were talking about this, that my presentation at reInvent, and I asked him what our value of our partnership is to him as a business leader. And he described it that we provide confidence that his digital assets are in a safe set of hands so he can focus on his business, his customers, and his franchisees. And I think that's a really good reflection on what it is to be a trusted partner as a next generation managed service provider. So thank you for listening to my little presentation and our story of Melbourne IT to ARC Group. I'm now going to hand over to Thomas Robinson, Partner Solution Architect for AWS, who's going to go a little bit deeper around how you can leverage some of the AWS services to help with that undifferentiated heavy lifting. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction. As Shane said, I'm a Partner Solutions Architect at AWS, and I focus on our MSP Partner program. And a lot of my conversations with MSP partners are around how they can convert their businesses to a managed services practice that makes sense in AWS, or start one from scratch if they're a traditional consulting or software development partner. And two of the big topics that I usually talk to about those partners is efficiency and then expanding the breadth of services. So taking AWS services and being able to do the day-to-day tasks that you have more efficiently through automation, reducing the cost of those things. So then you can take the time and money that you've saved and use them to expand the services that you offer to your customers. And that lets you get to the point that ARC Group is at, where you're really focused on what your customers' business objectives are, rather than figuring out how to expand your business to patch more servers. First, I'm going to start and talk through a couple of those common tasks that a managed service provider is always going to have to do for the majority of their customers. So patch management. You have servers under your management umbrella that you need to continually make sure are up to date or at the appropriate patch level. You need to take care of those tasks in a scheduled maintenance window that makes sense for your customer. Configuration management is a service that managed service providers typically offer, making sure that what your customers deploy meet the configuration that they desire, as well as making sure that they don't drift away from that desired state over time. Inventory management is a piece that's really important in the cloud. It's not about tracking servers and devices on a rack, but your customers are going to be able to deploy at scale throughout AWS, making sure you understand what's under that management umbrella, making sure what's running on those servers, because things like licensing costs can quickly get out of control if it's not something you're keeping track of. So your customers are interested in having you do that as their managed service provider. And then an audit trail. You're going to be taking action in your customers' environments on their behalf, understanding who did what and when, not only so you can track external threats, making changes to your customers that weren't intended, but also making sure that your engineers are taking appropriate action from inside the trusted network. So traditionally, managed service providers would either build or more commonly purchase tools to manage these tasks for them, help them automate and scale out these tasks so they can apply them to their entire customer base. And one of the first recommendations I make to partners when moving to AWS is really look at the tools that you're using. The first instinct is to take the tools that you're familiar with, that you like using on premises, and move them over to the cloud and see how they work. A lot of times you then get to the point where you find out that your tools don't integrate with AWS APIs. They don't read, the logging that happens in the cloud is different than what you get on premise. So the tools, you aren't getting the full value out of what you're paying for. And there's often a cheaper and more efficient way of doing things in the cloud. So I'm going to talk about AWS Systems Manager and how that tool can help you perform some of these day-to-day tasks in a much simpler and more cost-efficient fashion. I've got a couple of the Systems Manager features up on the screen, and just to look at some of those. For accessing your customers' instances, you need to SSH or remote desktop into those instances. We have AWS Systems Manager run command, which, as you can guess, lets you run commands at scale on customer instances. There's also another feature called Session Manager that lets you actually have direct interactive access to those machines. Patch management lets you define patching strategies for instances based off of something you're already using, which are tags. You use tags to organize instances and other resources for cost or for identifying them in monitoring tools. You can use those same tags to describe your instance's patching schedules. Going down to configuration management, we have State Manager. Helps you define some of those on-instance criteria, such as having a firewall enabled, antivirus installed, anti-malware installed, and help you not only make sure that when those instances are launched that they have those things, but over time making sure that someone didn't turn off a firewall rule, change some setting that you wanted to make sure is enabled. Inventory management lets you go deeper than something like the cost and usage report for really understanding what your customers are running. The agent that Systems Manager uses can collect things like application versions, OS patch level, and you can even build custom descriptions to help you pull whatever metadata you want off of those instances so you can report on that and give a really deep understanding of what your customers are running on those instances so they can manage things like licensing. And then for all of these actions, you have an audit trail through CloudTrail. So CloudTrail is something you're already using to track who launched an instance or deleted a security group or modified something in your AWS environment. Now you can merge your on-instance actions through there as well. So you don't have to jump from CloudTrail to see who launched an instance to a history log on an instance to understand who installed what packages, but you can see everything that was carried out through CloudTrail and not have to go from place to place. So let's look at some of the benefits of Systems Manager. First, it's a service that we provide at no cost. It's an agent-based service that you deploy on EC2 instances running in your environment. And we carry out those actions, and there's no API call costs or anything like that. It works on AWS on-premises and in other clouds, and we really mean that. As I mentioned, it's an agent-based service, so you could apply that agent to on-premises instances, and we really mean that. One of my first conversations with an MSP partner about Systems Manager, the question came up, I'm running a workload for a customer that's entirely on premises. Can I still use AWS Systems Manager for these operational tasks? And absolutely, even though there's no cost to the service. We don't want you to build out a complete separate tool set for using AWS. We want you to make sure that if you're going to invest the time and energy of building out a solution around these tools, that you can continue to use them for as many workloads as you want. Seamless integration with other AWS services. I mentioned CloudTrail and tagging, but you can also integrate Systems Manager with Lambda to really customize how you're using the service. You can use the console as well as the SDK and CLI to let your engineers have direct access to it in a human usable format in the console or the CLI, and then build automation around the SDK. You've probably made investments in tools like Ansible or Chef Inspec. We have integrations with services like that to where you can take those assets that you've already built and apply them through Systems Manager, so you don't have to restart from scratch. If you find things are still valuable for you in the cloud, you can carry those over. It's part of our HIPAA Business Associates Agreement, as well as SOC, PCI, and ISO compliance efforts. And access is controlled by IAM. So as I mentioned, for running commands and the audit trail through CloudWatch, you don't have to maintain a separate set of credentials. You get to access AWS Systems Manager and therefore your customers' instances through something you already have, which are your engineers' access keys, your federated roles, your instance profiles. You don't have to maintain a separate set of credentials. And as I said, it's free. We want you to take these services, select the ones that work best for you, and be able to apply those to your environment at no additional cost. So, after you've taken some of those basic MSP functions and made them low cost, made them efficient, what do you start thinking about doing? And it's really about identifying what your customers need. And we've got a couple of areas, and think about questions that you would ask your customer, ask yourself what your customers need. Some common ones that I talk about are, how does the customer want to interact with your service? Are they an agile, DevOps-enabled customer? Do they have their own CI/CD pipelines? Do they just want to connect to your managed services to be able to push code and have that appear in a manner that matches the infrastructure that they want? Are they a little more hands-on? Do they want you to build a cloud management platform to where you can provide them a service catalog of pre-approved, security-enabled packages that they can simply deploy into the AWS account? So think about how your customers, how mature your customers are and how they want to engage with your service. A lot of customers have legacy applications. How do they want to move those to the cloud? Are you able to offer refactoring or replatforming? Helping that customer understand what are the cost benefits, what are the operational benefits of doing something like taking a database that's currently on an instance and moving that to a service like RDS and Aurora to really be able to take gain benefit from that. And are you prepared to actually perform that migration for them? So it's not just whatever you build, we'll host it for you, but we're actually going to help you transform that architecture and put it onto something that makes sense in the cloud. And one that I'm going to focus on over the next couple of slides is, what's your customer security landscape like? What sort of tools are they using already? What do they like about them? And are those tools ready for the cloud? Especially when it comes to networking, things look completely different in the cloud. Everything's software-based. You don't have a device on a rack that you're getting logs from. There's different methods of getting different types of logs. So let's take a look at some of those AWS security services and what they do for your customers, and how you can start thinking about not just being a managed service provider, but being a managed security provider. So let's talk about how security is different in AWS. Guard Duty is something I'm going to go into in depth, but it helps you identify malicious activity in your account, whether that be AWS API driven, network, or DNS. We take logs from various AWS services and help you identify potential threats. Amazon Macie helps you classify and protect sensitive data in your account, helping identify PII and things of that nature that are in your environment, and help you make sure they're encrypted at rest and are appropriately secured. Amazon Inspector can look at your EC2 instances and the applications running on them and help identify security threats or security vulnerabilities that exist within those and send you an alert based off of that. AWS Config helps define the relationships between different AWS services, like your instances, the network interfaces attached to them, so you can help understand what that landscape actually looks like and how the different AWS services are interconnected. CloudWatch events is sort of the message bus for all of these events happening within your account. It's how you can trigger actions based off of CloudTrail. It's also a source of where things like Guard Duty send its findings. And then back to Systems Manager. A lot of the actions coming off of the back of a service like Inspector are going to be patching or updating an application to close those vulnerabilities. So it can be an important part of that security story. So how do you as a managed service provider take advantage of all that? You've noticed in a lot of those services previously, say words like discover and classify that information. AWS typically is not going to take an action to remediate all of your security threats that we identify in an environment, because you want to take different actions based off of the type of environment. So if we identify one of your stateless web servers may be compromised, what's the action you want to take? You probably want to quarantine it, launch a new one, so you can continue to operate and then perform the investigation later. If that's happening on a critical production database that if it were quarantined would take down an entire application, maybe you want a different approach. So we let you, as the MSP, along with the customer, define what those actions are, and you as the MSP should help automate as much as possible and then be that direct interaction with the customer. So off the back of these services, you have those events coming off of CloudTrail, and you can route those in a few different ways. For something like AWS Config, if you've noticed that your firewall rules in your security groups have gone out of band of what you have defined as acceptable, you can automatically remediate by sending that event to Lambda and doing things as code in a way that's going to remediate them in minutes rather than hours of creating an alert and getting an engineer to look at it manually. Trusted Advisor, if you get a notification that you're approaching a limit, you can open up a ticket to AWS support to increase that limit before it impacts your customer's production environment. Looking at something like AWS Shield, if we notice a layer 7 DDoS attack where your customer could engage with the AWS DDoS team, instead as an MSP, you can get that alert and manage that DDoS event for them. So you have all of these services. You can respond either manually or through AWS Lambda. One service that I wanted to go deeper into was AWS Guard Duty. It's a relatively new service that analyzes CloudTrail VPC flow logs and the DNS logs from the AWS-provided DNS resolvers. We take a look at reconnaissance data. So if you're being probed externally, port scans, SSH brute force attempts, RDP brute force attempts, we detect those sorts of things that aren't necessarily compromised instances, but are signs that someone's trying to get into your environment. We take a look at accounts that may be compromised. So we analyze all of your CloudTrail logs and try and identify patterns for your user's behavior. And if we notice something like a user all of a sudden who only calls resources in US West 2, launches a bunch of instances in Tokyo, that is probably something that you want to look deeper into to make sure that that user's credentials haven't been compromised and an attacker is launching resources in a region and hoping you don't notice. Instance compromise is another one. Through VPC flow logs, we can identify what your EC2 instances are communicating with on the outside world. Are they speaking to a command and control server because they have a piece of malware installed? Are they mining a cryptocurrency that isn't something that you want? For DNS logs, we look for data exfiltration attempts in those DNS logs. So if someone's attempting to discreetly extract information from your environment through DNS, that's something we can detect as well. And we send all of those responses through CloudWatch events. So then you can trigger a Lambda to remediate them, block that user attempting to probe something, shut down an instance that's compromised, or you can send that to SNS and get that alert through your typical incident management process. And it's a really easy service to turn on. It's a one-click deployment for a region. It's not a service where you have to install it and then point it at the S3 bucket that has your CloudTrail logs and your VPC flow logs. You don't even have to have VPC flow logs turned on for an environment to use Guard Duty. We have that data, and if you enable Guard Duty, we'll begin analyzing it, even if it's not something that you're using directly. And because it's not a service that you install and run, when we identify a new pattern that we can look for in these logs, you automatically get benefit from that. So it's not something where you're going to be running different versions of the software. You're always going to have whatever the latest set of vulnerabilities that we're scanning for are. And something that's a little bit different than the way AWS typically does things is we have a free trial. Rather than there be a free tier, we have a 30-day free trial. So the way Guard Duty is priced is we price based off of the number of events that we analyze for you. And we filter out things in CloudTrail so we aren't looking at very non-threatening calls, describes, and things like that, because we don't want to charge you for things that aren't ever going to turn into a finding. So what we do is we allow you to turn on the service in all of your accounts for free for 30 days. And during that 30-day period, we estimate what your monthly charges will be for Guard Duty. So I definitely encourage all of you to turn on Guard Duty in your accounts, see what findings it has for you over those first 30 days. Some of them will be immediate, like communicating to a known command and control endpoint or talking to the Tor network, things of that nature. Other things are based off of anomaly detection and machine learning, like user activity within CloudTrail. So turn those on, let them run for that 30-day trial so you can get a full view of what the benefit actually is for your customers. Diving deeper into what we look at in Guard Duty and how we classify those different events that happen. So we're looking at VPC flow logs, the DNS logs from the AWS resolvers, as well as AWS CloudTrail events. And we pass those through Guard Duty, and we send you findings based off of those results. So a low priority finding might be that reconnaissance attempt where it's not something that's actively been compromised and is causing you issues in an account, but something that you probably want to block anyway, just to avoid the issue of having somebody probing your environment. Medium priority is typically going to be something like the anomaly detection finding. Like, we think this user is acting erratically. It may be something that you want to look more deeply into. And then the high priority findings are the things like you have servers talking to the Tor network. There's very obviously malware installed on this server that you need to go and investigate and shut down because your systems have effectively been hijacked. And then you, as the MSP, can take those findings from CloudWatch events and respond to them. The one example that I used was something like something being probed on your network. And we have a blog post on the AWS security blog that goes into how Guard Duty can be used to automatically block those attempts. It uses AWS Lambda to respond to those events. And it can then take action to block at the web application firewall or your VPC network access control list. And it starts with Guard Duty. And that event will show up if someone is probing your account, either SSH logins, RDP logins, any sort of brute force attack. That will show up in your CloudWatch event. The AWS Lambda function automatically takes that event. It has information like what IP you're being probed from and what IP is being attacked. It then stores its state in DynamoDB, so it'll log the IP address that it's going to block, and it's configurable for how long you want to block it. So if you want to block that IP for 12 hours, hope they go away and look for an easier target, You do that, and you don't have to manage it and remove that rule later. It will just automatically go and remove that block 12 hours later. It can send you an alert through SNS to notify you that it's blocked that IP, so you have an audit trail. And then it goes into the VPC access control list as well as AWS WAF. It blocks those IPs, so that user simply won't get a response from your servers anymore. And this is all packaged in that blog post and ready to deploy as a CloudFormation template. So it's one of those examples where I want our MSPs to look at this and think about things they can build that would help their end customers. So you can say that here are the security services you're providing. Rather than being their physical security provider because you're running their data center, you're now their cloud security provider. So help them react to the security issues that they see in the cloud, not the ones they were seeing on premise. So take a look at that blog post. I'm going to hand back over to Barbara here to wrap us up. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for that, Thomas and Shane. Great content, I think, to hear that example of one of our very successful partners who's been providing managed services with AWS for several years now, and some of the really exciting success that they've seen with their customers. So we've given a lot of information out here, and I know some of you are a little bit newer to working with AWS, so I want to take a minute and step back and talk a little bit about how to get started. I suspect most of you are already registered as APN partners. If you're not, that's definitely your first starting point. I recommend you go in and register with the APN or the AWS Partner Network. That will unlock access to our Partner Central or our Partner Portal, where you'll gain access to resources such as practice building white paper documents, technical white paper documentation, and access to additional free content and training to help you build your AWS practice. We also, in 2018, launched a new program or set of resources for our partners called AWS Navigate. AWS Navigate today, actually as of today, we just announced the launch of IoT, HPC, and DevOps tracks within Navigate. We now have 12 AWS Navigate tracks or paths available to our partners. AWS Navigate is an enablement and a training and education program that provides a path to specialization for our APN partners. As I mentioned, we have 12 tracks available today. Coming in Q1, we'll also be launching an MSP track to help support our partners in that journey to cloud managed services. So look for more information on that, but we're really excited to bring that content to you, including some white paper documentation around best practices in building an MSP business. Oh, helps if I push the right button. So Navigate helps align you to specialization or differentiation programs within AWS. There are 3 different specialization programs available to our partners today. The first is AWS Service Delivery. Partners at the standard tier are eligible to apply for service delivery recognition. This program validates your capabilities around delivering specific AWS services to your customers. Then there's the AWS Competency Program. Competencies validate your experience and proven success with customers in delivering solution, workload, or vertical market solutions to your customers. So if you're really strong in the healthcare and life sciences space, we have a competency aligned to that. If you really focus on Microsoft workloads, we have a competency aligned to that also. Through that program, partners or customers can find partners to connect with that have validated capability in the specific solution area that those customers are looking for. We also have our AWS MSP Partner Program. And through this program, we validate both your business and technical practice capabilities to deliver cloud-managed solutions over time to your customers. There is an MSP Validation Checklist that's available for download inside of Partner Central. There are almost 90 controls listed in this today. It does serve as the framework of requirements for the MSP program, but it's also an excellent resource for you to download and look through and engage with very early in your process in developing cloud managed services. We built it with the intent of it being a set and collection of best practices for partners in this space. So please access that document, leverage it as a tool and a resource. And over time, as you're able to achieve all of those requirements within the program, we'd love to recognize you within the MSP program as well. Today, we have about 115 partners globally in the program, including our colleagues at ARC Group. Would love to talk with more of you about building out this capability and how we can help enable you to drive successful customer outcomes as well. So a couple of key takeaways I want to touch base on. First of all, if you're not deeply familiar with the program yet today, I encourage you to access the AWS MSP Partner Program webpage. There's links to additional content and material out there available to you. Also, download and read the business case for next generation AWS MSPs. You can find it with a quick web search or maybe even more quickly through a quick search on the APN blog. That is the research that we commissioned from Forrester last year, and it's a really extensive study of the investments and results seen by some of our leading and highly successful partners across the globe in this space. Review the MSP Validation Checklist. As I mentioned, we designed it to be a collection of best practices and want that to be a useful resource to you as you're developing these capabilities. Work with your AWS Partner Manager. That is your go-to resource to help align you to AWS programs, enablement, benefits, resources, et cetera. So please leverage that Partner Manager. If they're not able to answer your questions directly, they can connect you to the resources that can. And also, please feel free to reach out to my team. We love to engage very early with our partners and help provide you the enablement, content, or share best practices as you move along this journey as an AWS partner, as an MSP. The email address you can reach out to us at is aws-msp@amazon.com, and we'll look forward to hearing with you and working with you more in the future. And that takes us to the end of our content. So I really appreciate everybody's time today to spend and talk with us. And I look forward to talking with you more and hearing more about your individual businesses. And last but not least, if you would please open the mobile app and complete the session feedback form. We actually read every bit of feedback that comes in through our session customer satisfaction responses, and we take that to help build out new and meaningful content for you moving forward. So thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of your reInvent. Thank you.